Now, it was a dramatic week at the National Assembly, one that exposed not only political tension but institutional fractures. Now, Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan, elected to represent Kogi Central, was barred from accessing the Senate chamber despite a Court of Appeal ruling affirming her mandate. The altercation between her and the security officials brought to the fore serious questions about separation of powers, constitutional obedience, and gendered gatekeeping within Nigeria's legislature. But that wasn't the only headline. The Senate also poured cold water on proposals for state creation, calling them impractical at this time, even as it approved a fresh round of foreign loans, raising concerns over Nigeria's escalating debt burden, legislative priorities, and also national equity. Now, let's bring you the full story in this package filed by Sagir Ibrahim for News Central.
We'll bring you that report in subsequent time. Apologies for that. In the meantime, to join us to sort of unpack all of this, we're joined by Sagir Ibrahim, our National Assembly correspondent, who's been tracking these developments from the capital, Abuja. Also joining us will be Honorable Victor Chukwuemele Obuzor, who is a member of the House of Representatives for Awoada, West Ogba, Egbema, Indoni Federal Constituency in Rivers State. Also joining us on the program today is Dr. Tonye Jaja. He's a seasoned legislative lawyer and expert in parliamentary law and procedure. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate you for coming onto the program this morning. Sagir, let me start with you. We saw the live visuals that happened. In fact, before we get into that, we now have your report. Let's bring that report that you filed in from Plenary this week. Here's a report from Sagir Ibrahim.
Well, it was a tense morning here at the National Assembly complex as security operatives prevented Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan, the Kogi State lawmaker, from entering the complex. Flanked by her supporters and journalists, the embattled lawmaker had decried what she called an unconstitutional denial of access, maintaining that her suspension had been set aside by a valid court ruling. While Natasha stood locked out, plenary resumed inside, with the Senate announcing plans to hold a special valedictory session on Wednesday to honor former President Muhammadu Buhari, who died in London on July 13 at the age of 82. The Senate President, Godswill Akpabio, also used the platform to debunk reports that 12 new states had been created under the ongoing constitution review. Senate President Akpabio had clarified that while there were proposals, none had passed the rigorous stages required for state creation. Also, the Red Chamber has approved the federal government's external borrowing plan for 2025 to 2026, which includes loans totaling $21 billion, 2.1 billion euros, and 15 billion Japanese yen, among others, for key infrastructure development projects. Additionally, lawmakers gave the green light for domestic bond issuance worth $757.9 billion to offset outstanding pension liabilities, among others. These are the details here from the National Assembly. More details coming to you in subsequent bulletins.
Sagir, there from Plenary that happened this week. Sagir, you've reeled out all of the details that happened during Plenary at the National Assembly. But I do have to ask, we saw the live visuals of Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan trying to, get access into the Assembly, but was denied that, flanked with, pressmen and her supporters as well. Do you know anything just besides what we saw on screen? What was the story behind the story of what happened on Tuesday?
Good morning, Judith. Good morning, Mas. Good morning, viewers. It follows, of course, her announcement that she was going to resume. Of course, this was the second time that she had made the announcement. She had made a previous one, I think, around 2 weeks before this one. This one happened on the Saturday, I think also last week, Saturday, when she was commissioning some projects in her senatorial district. She was in an interview. She had explained that she would be returning to the National Assembly and resuming her duties as senator representing Kogi Central following the ruling of the Federal High Court. She did just that. She was at the entrance of the National Assembly, flanked by supporters, flanked by activists, and of course members of the media who were there to capture the moment. She made an attempt to enter. She was not allowed to enter the premises with her vehicle. She alighted, and of course, in company of all of these individuals that came to show support, she proceeded to the main entrance of the National Assembly. It was locked and everyone was prevented from going in and out. Personally, I struggled to weasel my way out of the National Assembly just to be able to get and report all of this. Well, that happened. She completely was denied entrance into the premises. The media was there to capture it, and of course, she made her statement arguing that she was going to be returning to the court, this time the appellate court, to seek proper interpretation of the judgment of the Federal High Court. Just so it is clear that it was a ruling of the Federal High Court that gave her the powers to return. Because the Senate's position on this matter is that the Federal High Court only provided an advisory rather than a ruling itself, because in its defense, the Federal High Court should not be able to give its directive with regards procedures that it had the independence to carry out sanction. And in this case, her matter, the Senate has deemed her guilty of misconduct and unruly behavior on the floor of plenary, and it reserves the right to do so in terms of disciplining her by virtue of the Senate rulebook. So this is the reason why the Senate has, retained its stance that she remains suspended until all of the demands they had made, including a public apology to the chair and of course to Senate, is, done by her. So we see all of these dynamics continue. She, like I mentioned, has been denied access. She says she's going back to court. We are waiting to see what the pronouncement of the court is going to be when she files this. So that's where we are on that.
Very interesting. Seems that Senator Natasha is spending more time in court than in the Senate. But let me come to Dr. Tonye Jaja. Dr. Tonye Jaja, you are an expert when it comes to legislation and also an expert on parliamentary law. Thank you very much. Dr. Jaja, how true is it that the Federal High Court's ruling, it's being referred to as obiter dictum at this point, that it wasn't really a ruling, it was just an indication or a suggestion. Is this true? Does the Federal High Court lack the jurisdiction to operate or to advise when it comes to Senate matters as is being put out? Is there a miscommunication somewhere regarding the ruling in court there? Dr. Jaja.
Okay, yes, Section 318 of the Nigerian Constitution says whatever pronouncement is made in court is a decision of court. It's not an opinion. If you want the opinion of the Justice Binta Nyako, you should go and visit her in her bedroom. She will give you opinion. But when you go to court, you file papers in court, and the judge gives a judgment. That's a decision by the Constitution. So for you to cherry pick and say this part of the decision is not, no, Section 318 is clear about this in the Constitution. So interestingly, this week, Senator Bamidele described the Senate president as being autocratic. Autocratic means he does not abide by even the Senate rules when it comes to adjournment, when it comes to litigation. The quarrel began because Senate President ordered lawyers to file an appeal, a cross appeal against the judgment of the 4th July. Now, the Senate rule says there's a procedure before you commit the Senate to legal litigation, order number 40 of the Senate Rules 2023. So what we are seeing playing out is, number one, the Constitution is the supreme law of Nigeria. It supersedes the Senate standing order. And Section 63 of the Constitution says no legislator should sit for less than 181 days. Now, the question is the Senate not obeying this? Why are you forcing Senator Natasha not to sit for this number of days? So, as a legislative lawyer, what I foresee would happen is, for the first time in Nigeria, we may have an off-season election for Kogi Central Senatorial District. Because Senator Natasha has not sat for the complete number of days, it could be that her election, she may have to do what we call carryover. So the election for Kogi Central may not hold at the same time with other elections for the Senate. That's what I foresee playing out because she has not met the constitutional requirement.
Now, I have to ask you, Doctor, right, because from what we see there on the screen, you can see Senator Natasha walking to the assembly along with her supporters and pressmen. Now, earlier our correspondent here, Sagir, told us that the cars were not allowed to come in, and so she had to park a car and then walk all the way to the assembly. Does the NAS, that's the National Assembly security, have any legal grounds to bar a sitting senator after an appellate court ruling? I think we have to be clear on this.
Well, there's a law called Legislative Houses, Powers and Privileges Act 2017. That law gives them the power. The office of Sergeant at Arms is created by that law. Now, yes, the leadership of the Senate, through the office of Sergeant at Arms, has the power to designate who to allow or refuse entry into the National Assembly premises. So yes, by law, they have that power. However, the question is, can a legislation supersede the Constitution? The Constitution is clear and backed by the judgment of 4th of July. This senator, the judgment says you must allow her sit for 181 days. So, and that's because Section 63 of the Constitution says this. So the Constitution is on a higher level than any other law. So based on that constitutional provision, it is you are violating the Constitution by preventing Senator Natasha from completing her constitutional obligation, which is higher than the Legislative Powers Act 2017.
We are also now joined by Honorable Victor Obuzor. He's joined us to have this very interesting conversation. Now, Honorable Obuzor, you're welcome. I would like us to talk about the borrowing spree Nigeria seems to be having currently. We're borrowing in yen, we're borrowing in euros, we're borrowing in dollars, and not just any kind, in the billions. So the Senate seems to be very proactive when it comes to this. I'm wondering exactly who's pushing for all these approvals and why they're so quick at coming. Honorable Obuzor.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me once again. So when we say who is pushing, from my perspective, my opinion, I believe the people are pushing. If you check our 2024 budget estimates, and then you check the inflow of revenue, you see how much deficits. We're looking at 54 trillion against the 28 trillion income, approximately. How do they fund the rest of the estimates, which, well, if properly funded, are intended to soften the cries of the grassroots, the common man today? You see that even you look at contractors that have been operating within the system, the civil service, who are meant to implement whatever kind of service contract and so on. Those that have done, met their obligations, they have not been able to be paid. So, in other words, the total revenue generated was not enough to fund the budget. Aside that, we are still looking at the structural development, the human development, and all that the country requires at this moment, industrialization. Where would they get the money from? I like it when we are very objective with the situations at hand, not because of the people who are, in quotes, in power and have the positions, whether either elective or appointed, to administer these monies when they come. Our problem in Nigeria everyone knows, is to properly monitor, in fact, accountability, if I should use that word, which it's up to the peoples of Nigeria, the legislature, and everyone with the responsibility to carry out those functions to do more than their best, so that we can keep growing in terms of ensuring that these monies, when released, get exactly to where they are supposed to function, so to do what they are sent to do. I think this is where we should be looking at this from, because with all the statistics, fine, the government looked at it based on the economic numbers. I'm not a specialist in analysis, but at least if I look at what is presented, I can say, okay, we can take the chance. Nigeria, before Bola Ahmed Tinubu came into power, if you recall, without removing the subsidy, with our debt burden, 90%, over 90%, how would we have coped if we did not remove subsidy? People don't even look at it. Every money that comes in, you use it to settle your debts. But today, with this borrowing, we still stand at about 50%. And it's within international limits. So you can say, criticism is good. Criticism is good. But let's also be objective when criticizing, and also to give room for pragmatism. Let this play out. This is 2 years. We are having better stability. You can see that the numbers in terms of the exchange rate is even still coming down and down. And it will continue to go down if we are doing the right thing.
Honorable,
the Naira was already destroyed. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, I was going to ask you, right, and now that we're talking about the transparency clause and pretty much the subsidy and just the state of the economy, as we discussed this foreign loan that the Senate has approved during plenary this week, transparency clause is one of the biggest issues, right? If you say that let Nigerians wait these 2 years, and even criticism is good, but the 2 years we must wait to see how this will play out. Subsidy has been removed for what, 2 years now? Do we have the details of what that money has been redirected to? Have there, in terms of transparency clause, do we know the fine print, the details of where this money is being channeled to? As we are going 2 years into this administration to take foreign loans that are concessionary, as this administration would say, what are the details of this money? We just know the sum lump. We don't know whether they're directed to the agencies that are taking them, the MDAs that will be receiving them. Will there be transparency for Nigerians to see in terms of the subsidy and this foreign loan?
So that's a good question, and it's an opportunity to let Nigerians know. And also, when they listen to a lot of people speak, the media is an avenue to reach out to people. Information that may come out may be true, information that may come out may be false. A lot of people may use it to mislead the people. Some may have integrity enough to say it as it is. We have a Freedom of Information Act, and there's no one who needs information about government activities who requests that will not be given, first of all. Second of all, you can see that although the activities this administration met had already put the system in a very tight corner economically, after the removal of the subsidy and also floating of the dollar, the devaluation was a lot. So a lot of money from the subsidy being given to the people is not really as effective as it should be in terms of the value. But if you check the numbers that come in when they do the FAQ and they distribute the sharing of the funds to all the states, you can see that in terms of numbers, the states are having 10 times over what they were having before. They are having, if I'm not exaggerating, they're having a lot of money to their coffers, all 36 states. And then the federal government disbursements are there with the ministries in terms of the federal budgets. It's our duty to follow, it's our duty to criticize, it's our duty to ask if projects were done. The National Assembly carries a lot of oversight, but the citizens also, they have the right to also request whatever information and also make public if they are refused that information. So we should start from the sub-nationals. You ask the state governments, what are you doing with your funds? These are a lot of money. A lot of them, if you check, they have settled majority of their debts based on this extra monies that came out from the subsidy removal. They are also stabilizing.
Honorable
which
Obuzor.
is still needs to do.
Honorable Obuzor,
Go ahead.
yes, so we get that the transparency is a shared responsibility. Unfortunately, we'll have to end the conversation here because we have run out of time for this session. I want to say thank you very much, Honorable Victor Obuzor, and also thank you very much, Dr. Jaja, and our correspondent, Sagir Ibrahim. Sagir, by the way, now that the Senate is on recess, does that mean you're jobless? Rhetorical. Answer. At least until September.
I'm still, it doesn't mean that I'm jobless. Like the Senate President mentioned, that plenary being on recess is not an excuse for lawmakers to go on holiday. As a matter of fact, there's still going to be committee meetings. There's a lot of work to be done. So yes, you'll be seeing more reports. I'll be coming more, on air. And of course, Mazino, like I mentioned, we'll finally put this to rest. You asked the question of what this week is going to look like. You now have your answer.
Yes, indeed.
All right. And it makes you wonder where Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan's suspension lies in all of this when the Senate has gone on recess to resume September 5th. Only time will tell. Gentlemen, thank you so much. We appreciate you for coming on.